This project started when I found an old wardrobe. It was a 3-drawer wardrobe that was missing one of the doors and was completely beat to heck. But underneath it all, there was still some solid timber. And this is the story of what I do with the doors. One of the things that was appealing to me was the badge from the department store it was sold in. Anthony Hordern Sons was on Pitt Street between George Street, taking up the entire block, and at one point in time was the largest department store in the Southern Hemisphere. World Square sits where it once was. So I couldn't properly restore the wardrobe, and so I was left with 2 doors that I wasn't exactly sure what to do with. I decided that once I fixed the veneer, maybe I would come up with something to do. Given that the doors were constructed with solid hardwood timber, I figured they might be strong enough to make a shelf out of, and that's what I ended up doing. The hardware from the door I saved for any future restorations. I found with a small saw like mine that extending the fence with a straight edge gives me better cuts. And I squared up the bottom with a circular saw and a jig. So the goal for this project is to clear out scrap wood and purchase nothing. So the inside of the shelf is going to be made with some scrap plywood that's been sitting around the garage collecting dust. I don't want to have to refinish the entire thing, so I just sand off the front. That's the part you'll see when there's books on it. So for the finish, I just mix up some basic shellac. That's what was on the piece to begin with, and shellac is great because you kind of put it over anything and underneath any other finish. I add a little toner to give it some color that matches. And it doesn't take much before you can see just how beautiful the grain is in the timber. To fasten together the 2 sides of the shelf, I just used biscuits and pocket hole screws, as I didn't want to put any fasteners through the show veneers on the outside. With one side bolted down, I can then add the other side to the shelf. Before I add the back, I can drill holes for adjustable shelf pegs. And the back for this was liberated from another half-broken wardrobe and is solid timber, slotted into sort of a tongue and groove kind of style. So I mark out where I need to cut and then actually do a little hand tool woodworking. It did fit, but I immediately realized there were going to be other issues.
I'm going to have to notch the shelves around this, aren't I? Because they're not going to fit.
So the shelves were originally cut flat, but because of that tongue and groove piece, I had to make a little notch. Fitting the solid backs proved a little difficult until I remembered to wax them, and then they just slid right together and I could nail them down in place. In keeping with the spirit of using everything possible, some of the decorative trim I cut off earlier, I've glued back together, and then I've pulled some of the little detail pieces to create a little header for the shelf and a little footer. Right about here, I dropped the camera, which is why everything is a little weird and blurry. Now, the question someone asked was whether books would melt into the shellac, and I didn't have an answer, so I sprayed the inside with pre-cat lacquer. And with everything done and dried, I could give it a nice buff up with some steel wool and wax. I think it's got just the right amount of shine, and it definitely feels strong enough to be used as a bookshelf.